Hey everyone, and welcome to the Robin's Movie Thoughts podcast with your host, Rob and Lalisse. Thanks for tuning in. Today I wanted to go over some movies and TV shows I watched in July and give you my thoughts on them. F1 is directed by Joseph Kosinski, who helmed Top Gun Maverick and stars Brad Pitt as Sonny Hayes, a race car driver who has dabbled into several racing leagues. When a Formula One team named APXGP is at risk of being sold if it doesn't win one of 9 final races, the team's owner, Ruben Cervantes, played by Javier Bardem, offers Hayes the final spot on the squad in what appears to be a desperation move. Hayes eventually accepts the overture, though his unconventional nature rubs some team members the wrong way. He does not follow the unwritten rules of F1 and disregards the advice of the team's pit crew, including technical director Kate McKinnon, played by Kerry Condon, and challenges the ego of the team's rookie driver, Joshua Pierce, played by Damson Idris. This movie felt like Top Gun Maverick meets Ford v Ferrari in terms of both story structure and elements, combining many of the best parts of both, but not quite reaching the heights of those two. Sonny Hayes had a 3-decade absence from Formula One to an early career crash, and it's an eerily similar arc to Pete Maverick Mitchell's in Top Gun Maverick, and any conflicts and resolutions he has are very beat-to-beat comps to that film. There's an attempt at romance with Hayes and McKenna's characters that doesn't feel as organic and well done as the romance between Maverick and Penny, and is part of a section of the film in Vegas that pushes the runtime a little far in trying to fix the main relationships in the film. Also, there's a part where the corporate element of racing gets involved in the form of APXGP board member Peter Manning, played by Tobias Menzies, and doesn't work out as well as Josh Lucas's character in Ford v Ferrari. Felt like that character was more dynamic and more fun. But despite these issues, there was a lot of things that I really enjoyed. The racing scenes were fast-paced and intense, with great camera angles and editing to get multiple points of view, shining best when it's in the car with the drivers. The musical score by Hans Zimmer was excellent and brought a kinetic energy to the scenes with the cars and without. The cast as a whole is really great. I've seen Brad Pitt be more charming, such as in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and more introspective, like in Ad Astra, but overall he is a pretty great lead for this movie. Damson Idris portrays the mindset of the young modern athlete in the age of social media and promotion really well, is able to hold his own in scenes with Pitt. Between Dune Part 2 and this, Javier Bardem is the ultimate hype man, pushing the protagonist to believe in himself beyond what he thinks he's capable of, and on the whole, Kosinski makes another entertaining blockbuster, though there's a few things that hold it back from being the perfect summer movie. On my scale, I'd give it a 7.5 to an 8 out of 10. Jurassic World Rebirth takes place in 2027, 17 years after the Distortus Rex escapes containment and forces the facility personnel to evacuate the island. As a result, the dinosaurs can no longer be kept in areas with human population and are instead left in non-populated areas near the equator. Pharmaceutical executive Martin Krebs, played by Rupert Friend, recruits covert ops specialist Zora Bennett, played by Scarlett Johansson, in a confidential mission to extract specimen samples from 3 different dinosaurs in order to create a revolutionary treatment for heart disease. After some hesitance that is reduced with a big paycheck offer, Zora accepts and joins Krebs to also enlist the help of paleontologist Dr. Henry Loomis, played by Jonathan Bailey, who was a student of Alan Grant, and accepts despite his moral reservations due to little to no public interest in the dinosaur museum he has helped create. Zora brings along a team of experienced operatives together, led by longtime colleague and friend Duncan Kincaid, played by Mahershala Ali. While attempting to complete their mission in Isle Saint-Hubert, they have to contend with deciding whether to save a family that was sailing before they were shipwrecked by one of 3 dinosaurs. Ruben Delgado, played by Manuel Garcia Rolfo, is a father with his 2 daughters, and he has to navigate a family vacation turned nightmare scenario while not being totally trustworthy of his daughter's new boyfriend. This is another Jurassic Park sequel that has tried to evoke similar feelings and memories of the 1993 original classic, but becomes yet another forgettable installment in the franchise. Director Gareth Edwards has always been good with creating fun, monster, and sci-fi action sequences, but the human character work has never been really a strong suit for him. It's hard to blame him entirely, though, or even any of the actors, as the characters themselves are just very bland archetypes that have been done and seen over and over again. The movie constantly cuts from this main mission to the family sections at a time, which does the pacing and ultimately the investment in the story no favors, especially when the family appears to have just 9 lives and can survive just about any situation nonsensically. I should have known from the beginning when a Snickers wrapper caused the door to malfunction in the opening scene that logic would not be this film's ultimate strong suit. That wouldn't have been too big a problem if the characters or story overall were more intriguing, but alas, Jurassic World Rebirth also has some hilarious product placement between the Snickers wrapper, Dr. Loomis popping Altoids, a mention of Nikes, and a bunch of brand label chips in a scene where a dinosaur tries to chase a family through an abandoned convenience store. I did not hate this film, as it had cool enough dinosaur chases in action, but everything felt like a dumb rehash of what had come before. Also, the movie tries to have this whole pharmaceutical companies are evil and greedy plotline, but it comes nothing close to the originals. Scientists were so preoccupied with whether they could that they didn't think whether they should analysis. I say all this to say it's a 5 out of 10 movie for me. Director James Gunn, coming off successful DC projects in The Suicide Squad and Peacemaker Season 1, helms the reboot of the iconic Superman, played this time by David Cornsweet, and the story begins with him 3 years into his time as the most powerful metahuman on Earth. He has to balance this along with being Clark Kent of the Daily Planet and a newfound romance with star reporter Lois Lane, played by Rachel Brosnahan, and also work with other metahumans like Hawkgirl, Elizabeth Merced, Green Lantern, Guy Gardner, played by Nathan Fillion, and Mr. Terrific, portrayed by Eddie Gathegi, and also deal with an identity crisis of who he is and what he represents. At the same time, he is dealing with Luthor Corp CEO Lex Luthor, played by Nicholas Hoult, who is obsessive and envious of Superman's power and popularity. Luthor is able and willing to do anything to get to Superman, including throwing kaijus and aligning with and influencing the U.S. government to put an end to his involvement in overseas conflicts. Watching the fan screening for this was a really fun experience, as seeing a packed theater with a ton of people in Superman brand attire excited to see a new iteration of the character was great. The movie didn't waste any time introducing the audience to the adult Supes with no origin story and the world he has to encounter, which includes social media reaction and working with superpowered individuals we haven't seen with him in live action. Normally, throwing this much at viewers from the very start would be a massive problem throughout, but luckily for the most part it isn't. This is due to there not really ever being a dull moment between the frenetic and creatively shot action going on and the characters having great chemistry and banter. I do wish there was a little more establishment of time and some more stuff examining the relationships Superman has with both sets of his parents, and maybe a deeper look at the Daily Planet life and workday, as I found the staff very good the little bit they were on screen. For this more whimsical, kind, and Boy Scout version of Superman, Cornsweet is perfectly cast, as he is able to keep as level a head as possible while encountering anything and everything in his path. Though there aren't a ton of Clark and Lois scenes, you believe in the relationship instantaneously due to how well Cornsweet and Brosnahan play off each other, and Lois Lane is a more sincerely active character than she was in the previous films. Holt is scary good as Luthor, as he is perfect as the egomaniacal tech boy genius who can change on a dime from crazy and neurotic to downright evil, not caring who he hurts in the process. Gathegi is a standout as Mr. Terrific, with matter-of-fact line delivery and being surprisingly central to the plot. The use of the dog Crypto may have been a tad much at points, but it's better than the alternative of having him be a nothing character and just specifically there for merchandise. I really like the musical score by John Murphy, as though it did owe a lot to John Williams' Superman pieces. It did do a lot to stand on its own, especially Lex Luthor's theme and one especially great track in Last Sun. I do wonder if there's a slightly longer version of this movie that gives more things room to breathe a bit, or if repeat viewings make this a near perfect story that both establishes Superman and the new DC universe about as well as you could have asked for. But for now, I will give this one an 8 out of 10. The fourth season of The Bear comes off of the cliffhanger of the third season when the restaurant receives word of the impending Chicago Tribune review of their establishment. When reception in the review is lukewarm at best, Uncle Cicero, played by Oliver Platt, makes it clear that no drastic improvement in the Bear's profit and efficiency will result in the restaurant being sold. Sidney has to decide if this opportunity is worth staying for and signing the partnership agreement, or taking a new job with another restaurant in the building stage. Carmen and Richie still have unresolved relationship issues from their blow-up at the end of season 2, and slowly make their way toward rebuilding their connection. The show has been a favorite of mine during its first 3 seasons, especially the first 2. The filmmaking and editing that puts the viewer in the chaotic environment that the food service business creates for all the characters while experiencing it and also unable to leave it even in their most private moments continues to be spectacular. The incredible performances by the main cast are still there as well. Jeremy Allen White, Eben Moss-Backrack, Ayo Edebari, again, they are standouts, and there are great guest stars. John Bernthal and Jamie Lee Curtis return, and Rob Reiner and Danielle Deadweiler are great additions. However, whereas season 3 is where a lot of people felt the show lost a lot of steam, this is kind of the season for me where a bunch of that territory is just being retreaded over and over. I watched through about 7 or 8 of the episodes thinking that by episode 10 that the series overall would be over, only to see the announcement that it was renewed for a 5th season, and it again ends up on somewhat of a cliffhanger, which is frustrating. A few great episodes for me were number 4, entitled Worms, where we see Sydney with some of her family and how she deals with her communication issues. Episode 7, The Wedding, where Richie sees his ex-wife get married and explores the father-stepfather dynamic in a really unique and heartwarming way that I don't think I've seen on TV. And episode 9, Tornado, where Carmen and his mother have a great heart-to-heart, where both actors pour their heart and souls out, and the stories of years of familial trauma not yet confronted until then. But on the whole, this season meanders and is the weakest. It ends up being an only okay season of TV overall for me. My scale, a 6.5 to a 7 out of 10. The Samourai is a neo-noir French crime film from 1967 starring Alain Delon as hitman Jeff Costello. Costello completes a contract on a nightclub owner and uses alibis from his girlfriend Jane Lagrange, played by Nathalie Delon, and his calm demeanor to at least temporarily escape police prosecution by the commissioner, played by Francois Perrier. However, when the men who hired Jeff try to kill him to throw off their trail, he is forced to go on the run and learn more about Valerie, played by Katie Rosier, a pianist at the club who had the chance to implicate Jeff but did not. This movie was an incredible combination of French New Wave cinema, film noir, and aspects of both samurai and crime genre films. Director Jean-Pierre Melville crafts a great product with limited locations and dialogue, relying on phenomenal cinematography and camera movement that tells so much of the story visually. The long, extended takes and silhouette shots look especially gorgeous on the 4K, and they stick the viewer into this world. Delon's performance is one that has influenced plenty of similar characters in film, such as Ryan Gosling's Driver in Drive and Tom Cruise's Vincent in Collateral, and it's obvious to see why, as his eyes tell you instantly and throughout the movie that he is as cool, calm, and collected in his demeanor as they come. Every action movie involving a hitman and her quiet, stoic male hero protagonist has something to owe to this movie, and I'm very glad I got it as part of the biannual Criterion Collection and chose to see it. Won't say too much more if you haven't had a chance to go and see it yet, but it's one that I can't wait to revisit and currently give it a 9 out of 10. The Amateur was a film that came out in theaters in April and was added to Hulu recently. It stars Rami Malek as Charlie Heller, a CIA cryptographer who is an ace with computer surveillance and analysis, but appears to have some desire to be a field agent. When his wife Sarah, played also by Rachel Brosnahan, is killed on a work trip, Charlie does everything in his power to get information onto the people who killed her. He presents this to the CIA Deputy Director, played by Holt McElhaney, along with evidence of CIA wrongdoings, in order to force and or blackmail his way into weapons training to try and catch his wife's killers. Colonel Robert Henderson, played by Lawrence Fishburne, does his best to get Charlie to complete training exercises on the farm, but recognizes almost immediately that he does not have the killer instinct to be an espionage expert in the field. Despite this, Charlie has a few tricks up his sleeve, evading the CIA on a globe-trotting trip to exact revenge on those who murdered his wife. For me, this ended up being pretty standard fare for a spy movie. In starting a rewatch of a favorite TV series of mine, Mr. Robot, it's obvious how great a performer Malek is, and outside of his Oscar for Bohemian Rhapsody in 2018 and a big moment in a bit part in Oppenheimer, he hasn't quite gotten a film to match his ability, in my opinion. This was meant to be an action vehicle where his ability to show intelligence and awkwardness could also shine through, but the plot and twists end up being either rather generic or not really that exciting. Lawrence Fishburne isn't in the plot that much as heavily as the marketing would suggest, though he is great in the portions he is in, and the same can be said for John Bernthal as a top-tier field agent Charlie befriends, and Michael Stuhlbarg as well. There's also a side plot where the deputy director and incoming director, played by Julianne Nicholson, are playing mind games over who has authority, and meanwhile Charlie is causing havoc overseas, and none of the police agencies in countries like France and Madrid and elsewhere can locate him. While he did create these surveillance programs for the CIA, the amount of chaos his actions create does really stretch the believability of him never really being apprehended by the authorities. There are also a lot of parts where his wife Sarah appears only for him in order to give the story more emotion and purpose, but not in any way that feels profound. So at the end of the day, I found The Amateur to be fine, I guess. 6 out of 10 movie. Together is a horror film directed by Michael Shanks and starring real-life husband and wife Dave Franco and Alison Brie as Tom and Millie. They portray a couple who moves from the city to the countryside. Tom, a musician in his mid-30s who has to pause his fun tour life to move in with Millie, who has received a new teaching job in the countryside. Tom also has to deal with familial trauma and some hesitancy in the commitment in his relationship with Millie, despite taking the proverbial plunge with moving in with her. Shortly after arriving, the two take a hike down to the nearby forest to explore, only to fall into a deep cave filled with darkness and a surprisingly sticky substance. They are both able to find a way out of the cave, but despite them dealing with resentment and relationship issues throughout, Tom and Millie are unwillingly drawn to being both figuratively and at times literally inseparable from each other. Neon had as fun and inventive a viral marketing campaign as possible for this film, and its great reception also piqued my interest to see it. A major strength of this film is Shanks and his eye for the camera in his directorial debut, as he's able to create an unnerving and claustrophobic experience for the viewer. Everything from drone shots to slow zoom-ins and close-up angle shots that move with the character make things uncomfortable. The chemistry between the two leads is fantastic, with Franco and Brie playing off each other really well, both intense, dramatic scenes and surprisingly comedic ones. The other main performance is by Damon Harriman as Jamie, another teacher in Millie's school, and he always plays interesting characters that seem to be hiding something. In a film with a ton of grotesque body horror and visuals, the humor involving relationship dynamics generally works and releases a ton of tension. As far as some weaknesses, there are some cliches from horror movies that pop up a bit, such as cult lineage, history of missing persons in the area, plot, and soundtrack elements similar to 2018's Hereditary. As a weirdly crowd-pleasing horror picture, Together is one that I had a ton of fun with in the theater, though I don't know if I would put it quite in the category of top tier in the genre. Right now, I'd give it a 7.5 out of 10. Thanks again for listening to this podcast. You can find me on Letterboxd at Rob Lalisse and on X at Rob the Movie Buff. Thanks again, guys, and love you all.